think that, again, we learned very quickly that there is great strength in numbers. And when the proposed regulations came out in '79, there was, by then, Donald Chalkley had retired from the Office of Protection from Research Risks, and there was a new director named Charles McCarthy who came to PRIM&R and who was just, from the beginning, as committed a partner as we could have asked for. And that, again, was one of those liminal moments where I said, this is going to build PRIM&R, because if the federal government agency that's responsible for the area in which you're working is a solid, committed, and entirely ready partner, then you've got credibility and certainly a lot of visibility. So Charlie McCarthy brought the draft regulations to the PRIM&R conference in '79, seeking our audience's input. And that was, again, the best this community could have hoped for. You mean we can help shape these regulations? And he said, come away, bring it on. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. Tell me how to make it better, them better, the regulations. Because he knew that if there was input from, investment in, and certainly a sense of ownership of the regulations, or at least participation in the process of developing the regulations, a sense of ownership in developing the regulations, then compliance would be a lot smoother and easier. And he is so wise. He's 88. He just turned 88 last Monday. And he's so wise. He's a former Catholic priest and just a wonderful, wonderful human being. But he actually said, give it to me straight. Tell me what you think. Call it as you see it. And because of that iterative process where he brought a few different successive drafts of the proposed regulations on protecting human subjects to PRIM&R conferences, the final version, which was finally and published in the Federal Register in 1981, was the result of discussions, dialogues, debates, and sometimes shouting matches at the PRIM&R conferences. So that was a huge moment where I knew we were making, and had made by the time of the publication of the regulations, a difference. Clearly, having a voice in the regulatory process was huge. Having a contract with the President's Commission to write the guidebook was, again, a huge impact that we saw when we finished it, because that was sent to every research institution.
Do you remember what year that was?
That was '81. And that's where I first started to work closely with Alex Capron, who's now our board chair, and another very cherished mentor and friend to me, and really one of the luminaries of the field, since he worked with Jay Katz on the seminal book in our field, Experimentation with Human Beings. Alex was Jay's collaborator and co-author, and he has been true north for many of us in this field. So that was '81. And I think another important impact that we had in the '80s was when HIV/AIDS, when the pandemic was first identified. Again, there was no place for all of the stakeholders to come together. There were places for scientists to come together and talk about it, places for activists to talk about it. But PRIM&R was the first place where everyone, activists, people affected directly by HIV/AIDS, lawyers, certainly researchers, research staff, legislators, ethicists could come together. So that was another place where I saw an immediate impact. And the proof of that impact was that C. Everett Koop, who was then the Surgeon General, came to a PRIM&R conference and gave a keynote and thanked me personally for having this conference. And he was a remarkable man. We developed a friendship that endured almost to the end of his life, and was someone who I admired greatly, despite the fact that initially it would have looked on paper like he and I might have been oil and water, but we became fast and great friends. So those were just three of the examples how we saw impact. We saw impact on regulatory input, we saw impact on President's Commission guidebook, and we saw impact in being there when HIV/AIDS struck to bring everyone together to talk about the ethical and social issues.